You're not crazy. Your heart just remembers lifetimes the world forgot. They called you crazy because you loved without armor. You're not losing your mind. You're losing what broke it. You're not insane. You just saw love where others saw control. Your crazy was just your soul refusing to settle. Loving them wasn't madness. Staying was. They called you unstable. You were just too deep for shallow people. You cried over silence. That wasn't madness. It was memory. You're not crazy. You're the mirror they refuse to face. You didn't imagine the connection. You just felt it louder. You weren't overthinking. You were picking up what they buried. Your love wasn't toxic. It was truth. You scared them because you saw through them. You felt everything. That was your gift. They made you question yourself because they couldn't lie to you. They called it obsession. You called it soul recognition. You weren't crazy for hoping. You were healing through it. You didn't want too much. You just wanted real. You weren't intense. They were numb. Your heart isn't dangerous. It's divine. Loving them felt like bleeding light. They couldn't handle your fire, so they called it madness. You're not unlovable. You just needed someone brave enough. They said crazy. You meant connected. You broke because you bent for people who never bent for you. They said clingy. You meant devoted. You're not too much. You're just not their little. Your soul recognized a liar. That's not madness. It's memory. The ache you feel. That's love trying to escape silence. You weren't obsessed. You were awakened. Your love shook their lies. You didn't ruin it. You revealed it. You loved out loud, and it scared their shadows. You weren't crazy. You were the only one feeling. You weren't irrational. You were intuitive. Your soul kept receipts their mouth tried to burn. You weren't dramatic. You were drowning in silence. Your love made liars twitch. You didn't make it up. You just couldn't unfeel it. They didn't want love. They wanted control. You were loyal to a version of them that never existed. You heard the words they never said, and it broke you. You aren't crazy. You're cracked open. They blamed your heart because it told the truth. You didn't fall too hard. They caught you with lies. You loved them like a prayer. They treated you like a game. You're not delusional, just deeply tuned in. You weren't needy. You were starved. You chased closure in someone who never opened. Your sensitivity was a threat to their mask. They called it drama. You called it drowning. Your pain isn't irrational. It's ancient. They made you feel crazy for seeing the cracks. You saw their soul. They saw an escape route. You didn't make a mess. You uncovered one. You felt more than they admitted. You were whole. They were hollow. You tried to build a home where they kept the exits open. You weren't paranoid. You were prophetic. They feared you because you remembered who you were. You didn't imagine the shift. You sensed the silence. Your intuition kept screaming. They kept lying. You weren't crazy. You were chosen to see. You loved them into wholeness. They left you in pieces. You gave them everything, and they called it too much. You were a mirror they smashed and blamed for the shards. You didn't ask for forever. You asked for honesty. You cried over someone who barely blinked. You're not broken. You're awakening. They called you emotional. You called it honest. You didn't go crazy. You went deeper. You didn't want chaos. You wanted clarity. They ghosted you because you saw them too clearly. Your soul isn't weak. It's wild. You didn't overlove. You overlived. You sensed every shift they refused to name. You weren't crazy. You were cracked open by truth. They laughed at your love. That's why it hurt. You weren't the storm. You were the siren. You aren't too much. You were too real. If this touched your soul, don't scroll. Like, comment your favorite quote and subscribe for more. You were just too awake for their sleepwalking love. They said chill. You said truth. You didn't break down. You broke open. Your love burned too honest for their shadow games. They feared your chaos because it mirrored their silence. You weren't intense. You were just unfiltered. You knew it was over before they said a word. You begged for answers they buried in silence. Your pain wasn't pointless. It was proof. You weren't begging. You were bleeding. You were divine chaos. They were counterfeit peace. You weren't desperate. You were drowning. They used your love as leverage. You weren't imagining it. You were interpreting energy. You didn't love wrong. You just loved someone who hid. You saw their soul, and they ran. You weren't unstable. You were unshielded. Your feelings were not too much. Their numbness was. You didn't lose them. You lost the illusion. You weren't crazy. You were cosmic.